and trafficking of human beings in the following terms. First of all, to disrupt organised crime groups involved in facilitation of illegal immigration operating in the source countries, at the main entry points to the EU on the main roads, and where evidence-based on alternative channels. To reduce organised crime groups, abuse of legal channels for migration, including the use of fraudulent documents as a means for facilitating illegal immigration, and to disrupt organised crime groups involved in intra-EU human trafficking and human trafficking from the most prevalent external source countries for the purpose of labour exploitation and sexual exploitation, including those groups using legal business structures to facilitate their criminal activities. During the cycle, 4-year strategic goals are defined for each crime priority, which are implemented by operational action plans, one per priority and per year. Honourable members, the very important and fruitful debate that we had today clearly proved that it is our joint challenge and joint priority to step up efforts to prevent the smuggling of immigrants, to fight it and to prosecute those involved in such activities. We look forward with great interest to the Commission's assessment of the existing instruments as announced by Commissioner Avramopoulos just now. To achieve the objectives of fighting against these criminal situations, it is crucial that all stakeholders make an active contribution. Along with the Council and the Commission, the European Parliament has a fundamental role to play in this respect. The Council stands ready to consider all the necessary actions and measures and to report to the European Parliament on their adoption and implementation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bardzo dziękuję pani.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, for your intervention in the name of the Council. I close the debate. The next item on the agenda is a statement of the Commission and the Council, Women on Company Boards. For the Council, the floor goes again to Kalina Lukanishevich. You haven't had much of a break. You have the floor again.
President, honourable members, women on company boards, our next today's topic. The subject of the gender balance on company boards is a very important topic. There is a broad consensus in Europe on the need to increase the number of women in decision-making, especially in businesses. I firmly believe that the Parliament, the Council and the Commission already agree in principle on the most crucial thing, namely that equality before the law is not enough. That we also need equality in practice, and that this also means ending vertical segregation. Honourable members, there is no reason in the 21st century why businesses, banks and the economy as a whole should be mainly run by men. Allow me, therefore, to thank the European Parliament for keeping this issue on the agenda and for insisting on progress. As the Commission has also stressed, European business needs the talents of Europe's highly educated women. Increasing diversity is also a way to improve the performance of companies. We look forward to constructive exchanges with the new European Parliament rapporteur on this file, Ms. Gabriel. According to the latest figures, the average share of women on boards of the largest publicly listed companies in the EU is now 18.6%. This is a clear sign that concrete measures must be taken to remedy the situation. How do we ensure that our largest companies can benefit from the talents and dynamism of both women and men? It is genuinely a political question. And policymakers have divergent views on approaches and what tools we should use. We should therefore not be surprised if more time is needed to agree. The goal we share can be reached by different roads. As you know, some Member States have already introduced binding quotas. Others are wary of interfering with company law and prefer self-regulatory measures. Honourable Members, by means of example, the share of women on the boards of Latvia's largest companies is 31%. I am proud to say that this result has been achieved without any formal measures of positive discrimination. Honourable Members, how do we crack the glass ceiling? What is the EU's proper role in this? The Commission's proposal for a directive in this area seeks to answer the question in its own way. The proposal itself is a compromise of sorts. It does not provide for binding quotas. Instead, it sets quantitative objectives. The main obligations that the proposal contains concerns the procedure for selecting board members, which should be fair, merit-based and transparent. I note that the European Parliament already adopted its first reading position on the Commission's proposal in late 2013. In that opinion, your institution broadly endorsed the approach suggested by the Commission. It is no secret that the negotiations on the Council side have been challenging. Despite efforts made by successive presidencies, our discussions have yet not to be completed. Views still differ between the Member States regarding the best approach. The diversity between Member States needs to be respected in terms of company law, the degree of gender balance already achieved and the national measures already taken to improve it. The Member States are taking action, but in different ways. We must also remember that the Member States start from very different levels. One thing is becoming clear. From a subsidiarity perspective, any future measures at the European level should recognise the fact that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. This was the spirit of the approach taken by the Italian Presidency. Building on this work, we will continue our search for a solution under the Latvian Presidency. On behalf of the Council, I assure you that we will take forward this work with a view to reaching an agreement. Thank you for your attention.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now the floor goes to the Commission. Commissioner Jourova has the floor.
Thank you very much, honourable members. I'd like first to thank you for adding this point to today's session, because it gives me the opportunity to present here the clear position of the Commission and of myself on this important piece of legislation which is under the process of adoption, hopefully. We are fully aware that the major steps on the road to effective gender equality need to be made. The adoption of the directive on improving gender balance on company boards will be an important step on that road. The directive will help smash the glass ceiling that prevents qualified women from holding top jobs. The directive is smart and flexible. It puts qualification and merit at the central stage. This European Union instrument is as necessary as ever. We still have only 18% of women on boards of private companies. At the same time, 60% of new university graduates in Europe are female. Their talent should not be wasted, in particular in light of the demographic changes we face in Europe. It is well recognized in numerous studies that a range of talents, experience and skills in the boardroom improves business performance and governance and drives economic growth. If we want to maintain Europe's competitiveness and stay ahead of demographic changes, we need more women at work, especially qualified women. Some Member States have seen positive developments, mainly those that have introduced or are considering legally binding measures, for example, France, Belgium or Italy. However, in others, the situation is stagnating or even worsening. We have tried non-legislative action at EU level, but with limited results, as you all know. Only a legally binding measure at EU level can effectively contribute to more gender equality in the area of economic decision-making. We will therefore intensify our efforts to speed up the process of the adoption of this directive. Let me remind you that what the directive seeks is progress and fairness. We do not want women to be privileged because they are women. We want qualified women to get a fair chance. This is why, rather than imposing a particular result, the proposed directive requires Member States to ensure that qualification, competence and professional performance play the key role during the selection process to the board positions. This approach is in line with the case law of the Court of Justice, which has set rules and conditions for positive action for the underrepresented sex in employment. It requires a comparative assessment of all candidates on the basis of the objective criteria. Since there are highly qualified women capable of being selected as candidates, this approach is the right one to take. I see that considerable efforts have been made by previous presidencies. This is very welcome, and there are concrete results of these efforts. The proposal is moving closer towards a qualified majority in the Council. In particular, the Italian presidency has worked intensively on this directive, and I am convinced that on this solid basis it is possible to agree that subsidiarity concerns are fully addressed. This should ensure the support of a sufficient majority of Member States. Latvia is among the Member States which have recently adopted a more positive approach to the directive. The European Commission is therefore encouraging the Latvian Presidency to use this positive momentum and actively pursue the discussion towards reaching a compromise solution. Thank you for your attention, and I am looking forward to your comments, proposals and new inspirations, also for me to be able to bring new arguments in the following negotiations with the Member States. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo pani
Commissioner, thank you very much for your statement on behalf of the European Commission. Now we shall move on to statements of representatives of political groups. First, I give the floor to the EPP in the person of Constance Le Grip. 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. It is 2015. Since November 2013, which is when the Kratzer-Regner report was adopted in plenary, calling on the Commission to ensure greater gender balance in major European companies on their boards. Since then, we've seen little progress when it comes to women on company boards. We adopted our position. Very little headway was made in Council thereafter. We were disappointed, or rather, we were pleased when the Italian presidency worked on this issue at the Competitiveness Council on the 11th of December. Now, the European Parliament has been extremely pragmatic. It has looked at quantifiable targets without binding measures, but ensuring more transparent, fairer selection procedures. The aim was to ensure consensus between the different groups. We ensured a balance in this way in the European Parliament. The aim is to increase the presence of women on the boards of various European companies and also respect culture, legal tradition in member states and indeed the legal framework in member states. The aim of the text is fairly modest. The scope is restricted to quoted companies, but of course the initiative is highly symbolic. It would make it possible to shine a light for future generations, ensure that more female leaders break through the glass ceiling. When legislative measures are taken in the member states, including my own, that is when we start achieving results. Now we need to galvanize the goodwill, the feminine will shown by the minister, the commissioner, and do our utmost to strike a compromise. The European Parliament is certainly willing to work constructively on an equal footing with Council. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. Madame Le Grip, I was actually scared to interrupt you in this debate, I must admit, but please stick to your time and I will give the floor to the Socialists and Democrats in the person of Mr.
Thank you very much. Many people claim that quotas don't...
Man tvingar företag att anställa kompetenta personer. Dock ska 40% av dem vara kvinnor. Och brist på kompetenta kvinnor är det inte. Det handlar också om att ändra perspektiv. Antingen anser vi att kvinnorna inte räcker till, att de inte har den kunskap och den erfarenhet som krävs, vilket inte stämmer. Eller så vänder vi på det och fokuserar på företagen och strukturerna där. Varför lyckas de inte anställa kvinnor? Det har nu gått över ett år sedan Europaparlamentet med en överväldigande majoritet röstade igenom EU-kommissionen.
Voted through the Commission's proposal. Since then, a minority of member states have blocked the proposal in Council and have forced a compromise. And that minority doesn't now seem to want to accept that either. These countries say that the member states themselves have to bring in legislation on quotas, that it shouldn't be at an EU level. That's rubbish, I say. Very little has happened in the member states during these years of blockage, and that means that we are sending a clear signal to women in Europe that we think you're doing very little to bring about equality, and that in any case you're not going to break through the glass ceiling and they're not going to get the top job simply because they're women. I feel that this is an embarrassment given the Council's action. I know that a lot of other women feel that to be a problem as well, and the Italian presidency's compromise not to make the 40% target binding is to perpetuate the structures we have and actively work against a more equal Europe. Quotas for company boards should be a universal solution for to think that is a universal solution would be an illusion, but it does send out a clear signal that equality is of essential importance for the EU and our future. Thank you.
Tak, dziękuję bardzo pani poseł.
Thank you very much indeed. Our debate is delayed, therefore I request all speakers, both men and women, to keep up to their timing. And now, for the ECR, the floor goes to Jana Żitňańska for 1 minute.
Thank you. A natural desire of every human being is to fulfill its full potential. As a mother of 3 children, being in politics for some years now, I'm convinced that regardless of whether a woman wants to live only devoted to her family or whether she wants to combine her professional and family life, it's our obligation to enable her to do that. And no proposal establishing quota will not create these conditions, which can be presented on the example of Norway, where in 2006 quotas were introduced but did not bring about the wished results. Not only women on company boards, but also the whole participation in the labour market is crucial, as well as sufficient places in childcare facilities. For instance, parental leave in the European Commission, it's possible to take in a flexible manner this parental leave up to the 20 years of age of a child. I've been trying to pursue this route also in the Slovak Parliament. I believe that these various methods could enable women to fulfill their full potential and not to face a dilemma how to combine a career and a family life.
Dziękuję bardzo pani poseł. A teraz w imieniu porozumienia.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Mrs. Mlinar on behalf of the ALDE.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Commissioner, Madam Kalniņa Lukaševica. Gender equality is one of the core objectives of the European Union, and the right to work is an essential precondition if women are to enjoy effective equal rights. Figures clearly show that discrimination against women is still a serious problem. The unemployment rate is higher for women than for men. The gender pay gap involves nearly every occupational sector, and moreover, while more education is an effective tool for increasing earnings, it is not an effective tool to fight the gender pay gap. Sadly, many people out there still argue that women themselves are the problem. Needless to say that this is certainly complete nonsense. It is a shame, and for me unbelievable, that we all, and also parents, in fact still accept that the opportunities for young boys are still better than those offered to young girls. Discrimination and unacceptable inequality has to be eliminated, no matter the means and the rules we have to apply. Thank you.
Danke sehr. A teraz w imieniu Konfederacyjnej Grupy.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the United Left, Nordic Green Left, and Mrs. Zuber.
É evidente que a ressonância mediática desta medida.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's clear that this will have a tremendous resonance, and that's why so many people are down to speak on this. Clearly there are many problems of inequality between men and women, and the examples in the real world are really shocking. There are more and more women in Europe who are unemployed, who are living in poverty, who have to work part-time, and time which is no longer available to look after their families. And women are also subject to domestic violence. Now, when it's necessary, as a result, to use family planning, when you have to bring up children alone, at a time when frontline services and child allowances and things such as that are being are being cut. This is the real world we now live in.
Zielonych.
Now for the Greens, the floor will go to Terry Reintke.
Dear Mr. President, dear colleagues, only 18.6% of board members in Europe are women. Among the top executive positions, it's only 3.3%. 3.3%. That is the way that we have come 222 years after Olympe de Gouges died under the guillotine and 66 years after Simone de Beauvoir published her famous book, Le Deuxième Sexe. Really? This is not only a minor problem of justice in the European Union. It is a frustrating scandal. A scandal that we could change. We could change it if only we could bring the process of really making the European Union a champion for women's rights again to bring it to a successful end. The introduction of a binding quota was started by courageous women. It was watered down, it was debated, praised and condemned. We as women and also men in this Parliament need to stand up for it now. We need to make very clear. We will fight for an ambitious, binding, European-wide quota for women in executive boardrooms. And we will not give up until women get what they deserve. Half of the power in boardrooms, in politics and in our societies. Thank you.
Danke sehr, Abgeordnete. A teraz poproszę panią poseł Marię.
Now the floor goes to Mrs. Gabriel.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Secretary of State. Since the draft directive was proposed, legislative pressure has been building up, and companies are finding competent, qualified, able women, and that's why we've seen an improvement in the situation by 18.6%. And yet, despite the burden of proof, we are marking time. The Parliament has proposed the basis for negotiation, and 2 presidencies later, the Council has still not been able to find agreement. It's now urgent for Member States to advance on this dossier with 3 main arguments. Yes, Madam Commissioner, women are 60% of the people with degrees, and their involvement on the labour force doesn't reflect that. The 2020 objectives are not going to work unless we break through the glass ceiling. And let's not think this is a burden for employers. Let's make better use of the available talent so that industry can remain competitive. Secondly, some people are allergic to quotas. This Parliament has given a pragmatic response. Quotas are not an end in themselves. They are an instrument to help the putting in place recruitment procedures which are transparent and non-discriminatory. Thirdly, we must give the industry a boost of a new lease of life, and because starting at the top will cause a snowballing effect and avoid a segmentation of the labour market. All of us wish and will better, more fairness between men and women. It's high time that this led to concrete action. Our margins for manoeuvre are limited, but where we can do something, it's politically irresponsible vis-à-vis citizens not to seize those opportunities. Thank you.
A teraz poproszę panią poseł Viliją Blinkevičiūtę.
Thank you, Madam Blinkevičiūtė is next for 1 minute.
Pone komisare, pone ministre, mes Europos parlamente jau 2013 metais priėmėme.
Back in 2013, the European Parliament adopted its position on the directive and set a good example for establishing equality in other areas. But we're still not inclined to give educated women the possibility of exploiting their full potential and to help fight economic stagnation in Europe. We need to make a decision to ensure that women can take top jobs in companies. In the European Union, only 18% of women are on management boards of companies, and we need a common directive, and we need quotas for women, at least 40%. Now that's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just looking across to the Latvian presidency here, and I do hope that you will take a responsible approach to this and produce a good result.
o zabranie głosu panią poseł Jadwigę Wiśniewską.
The floor goes to Jadwiga Wiśniewska for the ECR for 1 minute. Thank you very much, President. I agree that there are few women on company boards, but I don't think it's the right thing that it's for the European Parliament to regulate this. Let's leave it with the member states. But if we are talking about women in the European Parliament today, let me say this. I would like to discuss the situation of women in Poland in the Silesian region. In the Silesian region, women are striking against irresponsible actions of the Polish government, which will result in liquidating thousands of jobs, and the labor situation in this area is very bad. You might say this has nothing to do with the European Parliament, but it does. What is happening in the Silesia region is the result of the Polish implementation of EU climate policy. Let us deal with real problems of women. Women who have no jobs, women who have no houses, women who fight for jobs by taking hunger actions, women who want to combine professional career with being a mother. Let us deal with real problems of real ordinary women. There are millions of them in the European Union. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. The floor goes to Madame Zaskun Barandika for 1 minute.
Thank you. I am delighted that a compromise has been struck to maintain the initiative despite the difficulties at Council. This is a crucial initiative for equality and to bolster competitiveness in Europe, whether you like it or not. Feminine talent is sidelined in European productive systems for matches reasons, pure and simple. Now, women account for 60% of university degrees, so it beggars belief that they just have a token presence on the boards of major European companies. This is inefficient. We are squeezing out key talent when it comes to taking major strategic decisions. Men of Europe, stop cowering in fear of inequality. Dare to embrace it. You'll be amazed at how much you stand to gain. The first victims of the alpha male syndrome are men themselves. That's what you need to recognize.
Gracias. Poproszę teraz panią poseł Barbarę
The floor goes to Barbara Matera for 1.5 minutes.
Grazie Presidente. Nel novembre 2000...
Thank you, President. I remember Viviane Reding coming forward with determination, a draft which was intended to increase the number of women in top jobs in companies, listed companies. That was courageous. It was also prescient, and that's no doubt why it got such a large majority. And now we are one step closer to getting this on the statute book, a directive which would have the effect of having a more rational integration of women into the world of into the social world and also the world of labour. It's got to be flexible, so that there are ways and means. So far, the Council has not really risen to the challenge, and the Member States, some of the Member States have failed to do that too. But it's a matter of regret that the Italian presidency was unable to bring home the bacon here during their 6 months. This would have been a real blow for women and for children, because we, in 2008, you may remember, there was a bipartisan piece of legislation, and that was which had to do with the various bodies in the world of business. So there are good examples out there, and I hope that the Italian presidency would pull it off, as it were. But now we've got this directive going forward, and as Commissioner Tyson has said, it's more necessary now than it ever has been.
A teraz poproszę panią poseł.
Now the floor goes to Mrs. García Pérez for 1 minute.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. 18% of company board members are women. Clearly, the figure illustrates that we're getting something wrong. We live in an unequal society. Women do not have an opportunity to be part of key economic decision-making processes. We all agree that we need to do more, foster measures in this area. We cannot allow our approach to be scattered. If we leave this to the companies themselves on a voluntary basis, we will not achieve our targets and increase the level of participation of women. It is crucial and crystal clear that we need to set clear targets, quotas, to ensure that more women are involved in economic decision-making processes.
Now, Ms. Catherine Berder, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this directive has been stuck in Council since 2013. Just why are we still waiting for constructive dialogue to make progress? Just what are they scared of? One can only wonder. But we've actually come a long way on gender equality in the EU. We tend to move in fits and starts, but we are moving forward. In the UK, a report last year highlighted real progress. Women now account for just over 20% of non-executive board positions on the FTSE 100. And yes, shockingly, we still think that 20% is progress. The disparity on company boards is undeniable and there is no justification. The increase of women on boards is much, much too slow. The absence of women in leadership positions creates a vicious circle. The lack of women as role models reinforces the belief that women simply cannot make it in the corporate world. This House is testament to the fact that it isn't true. Commissioner Jourova, I was delighted to hear that this directive on women on boards was one of your main priorities. I urge you and the Council to keep the discussions moving forward on this essential topic. That way we can make full use of everyone's talent, regardless of their gender. Thank you.
Thank you. Jetzt Abgeordnete Angelika Niebler. Bitte sehr.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, we need more women in positions of responsibilities in company, and I think we all agree on the objective, and we've been discussing it for many years. I also think that the European Commission, under the leadership back when of your predecessor, adopted a very intelligent proposal for Member States, and I would just underscore what the Commissioner has said. It was smart and flexible, the proposal. That's what you said, and I think that's right. It gives Member States sufficient freedom of movement to be able to act. Now, I'm from Germany, and we had huge problems introducing a quota, and legislatively the Parliament has been consulting on this, and the initial results of this with the directive are now on the table, and in a big country like Germany we've seen a step in the right direction, which I think is a piece of positive news. And the political news that Mrs. Reding always tried to promote was that women should be given more positions of responsibility. So I hope the Council succeeds, and I hope that Germany will serve as a good example. I think it's high time that these proposals should be hammered home, and with sufficient support, then maybe even with the exemption for SMEs and family companies. Nevertheless, we've got a proposal here which is worthy of all our support. Thank you.
Dank, Abgeordnete. Jetzt Abgeordnete Sylvia Yvonne.
Thank you. Now, Sylvia Yvonne Kaufmann.
President.
Thank you, President. Almost half of the working population are women, and in the upper echelons they are hard to find, and there is a pay gap as well, even despite the fact that they are highly qualified, and that is getting worse, not better. We cannot simply accept that, so that's a very depressing begin when we talk about equal opportunities for the genders. It's a long-standing debate, and it's about time something changed. The Parliament has been active and in 2013 we adopted, shepherded through an important piece of legislation on that, and we have been waiting for the member states to move as well. But basically nothing much has come of all that, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is completely unacceptable. In Europe, we've got to make sure that we mean what we say in our Charter of Fundamental Rights, because Article 23 talks about equality for men and women, including in occupation, in work and in pay. And the principle of equality is part and parcel of that. And something has to be done in order to correct the balance. And the Latvian presidency must do everything to break the blockade in Council. I think Latvia can do something with 31%. Latvia has got the highest, is at the top of the class. You've set a good example and use that in order to end that blockade in Council. Thank you very much.
A teraz historyczna chwila, jako 18. mówca, ale jako pierwszy mężczyzna.
18th speaker, but the first man on the list, Mr. Schoenfeld. A minute and a half. You have the floor.
Dziękuję, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, President. In a modern society, we should strive for equal treatment of both sexes in the public sphere. It's a natural thing and it's a necessary thing. But when it comes to the private sector, we should be very responsible with instruments implemented to arrive at the objective, particularly where we talk about business. Because in business, it's the entrepreneurs who act in their own name for their own benefit at their own risk, based only on economical principles and principle of mutual trust. The right of property should be well protected, and owners must have the final say on their property, so also on the way in which it is run. Therefore, I think that member states have the right to regulate management, including regulating on sex parity, but only on public property. Therefore, I have doubts with respect to imposing the same principles on the private sector. Therefore, I think that the proposals discussed today should be reassessed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Maria Arena, 1 minute, s'il vous plaît.
Kolejnym mówcą pani Maria.
1 minute. Thank you. Commissioner, you ended your comments by mentioning arguments that would allow us to have proper negotiations with the Council. By way of reply, I would call upon the Council to come forward with some arguments which would allow it to fail to fight this injustice of underrepresentation of women in company boards. Are there any arguments that we could actually listen to that could provide justification for any opposition to there being more women in company boards? I don't believe there are any such arguments, and I'm not the only one. According to Eurobarometer, 88% of Europeans feel that women should be present in company boards, and 75% endorse the adoption of European legislation to that effect. So I would put it to the Council, come on, go for it, you've got the people behind you. Those firms who have opted to have women in their company boards have seen an impact on their performance, their productivity, their creativity, and also their governance. So all those are arguments that you should be able to embrace in the Council and the Member States, so as to enable you to fight to ensure that women are properly represented in company boards.
Bardzo dziękuję. Our next speaker is Itte Gutteland. You have 1 minute, madam.
Tack, herr ordförande.
Thank you very much, President. We need to have very fierce legislation in order to achieve what we are after now, and I'm convinced of this, having listened to this debate for many a time. Nobody will share power voluntarily. It's naive to think so. If you believe so, you will have to wait another 100 years. And
women have acquired what is needed and the education that's needed to be able to compete with the men. But myths are created in society so that women cannot acquire power. And one of them, these myths, is that there are no qualified women. There are many who wish to spread this myth. But the truth is that those in power do not really want to share it. One case is this chamber. This is proof of that kind of situation of the members. We have very few men who give priority to this debate. There were 3 a moment ago, but I think that is a good indication as to how self-serving interests are represented here. And that shows where you prioritize. It's time to really have solid legislation.
Tak, dziękuję.
Yes, thank you. Well, the chairman is a man, which shows that there is a will at the European Parliament to make sure that the quality of this debate is high. Jutta Steinruck, you have 1 minute.
We've been discussing the equality of women on the labor market, but what has happened after this non-binding discussion of so many months and months? 18% of women are in executive positions, so women are not really they're not within a system of equality. And even women who are qualified, but even minimally qualified individuals should have access. The access is necessary. Doing this would be opening the way for other women in Europe. So the EP has done its work. Now it's time for the Council to act. In Germany, women have seen the changes there, that simply working on a free will basis doesn't work, and people have understood that it was necessary to have some sort of regulation with a system of quotas, and this is something that has to be dealt with now. We need a new approach. We need a new approach in the Council. We need a new approach in Germany, a new approach in the other member states as well. Otherwise, we're going to have to be discussing this issue with regard to this ceiling for hundreds and hundreds of years. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mary Hannibal, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. No less a person than Mrs. Angela Merkel said recently on German radio that we simply cannot afford to do without the skills of women. But this draft directive, which has come from the European Parliament, is about more than skills, and it's about more than company performance. It's about equality, something which the EU as an institution has believed in since its very foundation in the Treaty of Rome in 1957. So it's quite shameful, absolutely shameful, that the Council has sat on this, has blocked this measure for such a long time, and I think we need to do all that we can to get movement. And I think Latvia is beginning to do that now, and we should welcome that. And this is an eminently reasonable measure that we're putting forward. There are qualified women out there who are quite capable of doing a very good job on company boards, and women in leadership is an EU matter. We need to do it and fight for all the women throughout the European Union.
Thank you very much indeed. Adesso, signore Sergio Gaetano Cofferati.
Now I call Sergio Cofferati for 1 minute. Thank you, President. Madam Commissioner, I'm also of the view that the blockage in the Council on this item is simply shameful. There's no proper reason for this. It's purely a question of ideology. Lines of thinking are being put forward that are completely unsupported. Now, you're looking for ways and means of tackling this. Let me share my own thoughts with you briefly. Equal opportunities is a basic human right, which is now being denied by hostility within the Council. Gender equality on the items that have been mentioned here, and you can see this in those countries that have significant experience with this, create great advantages in the productive system. Women can bring in a significant way of thinking and knowledge that men are often lacking, and that's very important. You've got to have a proper body of legislation for this with penalties attached to it, because principles are not enough on their own. The current situation is unsustainable. You can't talk about Europe based on rights when such discrimination continues. Thank you very much, Mr. Cofferati.
We should now commence the Catch the Eye procedure. It is very late, thus I will ask for each political group to delegate one person. For EPP, Madam Patricia Sulin will be the speaker. The floor is yours.
Hvala predsedujoči za besedo. Žensk je premalo na področjih odločanja. Tudi v Evropskem parlamentu smo.
There are too few women in positions of power. Also here we are in a minority. But in 2013 there was 17.8% of women in leading or managerial positions. If we didn't have activities in Europe such as the European Strategy for Equality or quotas for women in company boards, we would see even less. It's a very important area because the EU must play an important and leading role, but we are becoming active too late. Women are welcome in the industry and in the economy, but if we want to see changes, then we must act through different stages of life. Women are being educated, and for example they should train in IT, and then perhaps men should take up care as an education so that there will be more equality. The lack of equality means a great loss of interest. The GDP is 10% lower because of this situation.
So, Honorable Michela Giuffrida.
Grazie Presidente, signor Presidente.
Thank you, President. President in Office, Commissioner. The obstructionism on gender equality in quoted company boards is simply incomprehensible, quite apart from being absolutely unacceptable. Thanks to the mediation of the Italian presidency, we planned for those member states who already had a good performance to continue their policies without needing to transpose the directive. Above all, the 40% threshold of women was not going to be subject to penalties. No member state would have been punished if that objective had not been fulfilled. But on the basis of all the available research, which shows the positive impact of women in positions of power, of course you can't just confine yourself to statistics. All this leads you to wonder, what are people afraid of? What's the problem in transposing this directive, which doesn't even have any binding penalties written into it? I do hope that it's not just a cultural problem and to do with economic governance. I do hope that the Latvian presidency will not allow this to remain in a vacuum for another 6 months. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. Z grupy EKR, pani
For ECR, Róża Tomasić will take the floor.
Podzastupljenost žena, underrepresentation of women u europskim poduzećima, jedan je od underrepresentation of women in European management boards is one of political challenges of first rate, but I believe that we are approaching this problem on one dimension. I don't believe that anybody here believes that this low percentage of women on management board is something good, but many of those, among which I am also, believe that forceful increase of this threshold could be counterproductive. Any discrimination must be rigorously sanctioned, but the question remains whether by the system of quotas we are going to gain respect for women in business. I believe that we are going to make them just the objects. We are just going to meet the formal requirements, and they are not going to be those who really deserve respect of male colleagues. Thank you.
Chwala. Z grupy ALDE, pani...
Madam Filiz Husmanova will speak on behalf of ALDE.
Господин председател, госпожо комисар.
Thank you. Mr. President, Madam Commissioner, we have a single labour market in the European Union that should give equal chance to men and women to occupy managerial positions. However, this is not the case in all member states. The draft directive creates conditions for achieving the objective. It is not just a hollow promise. Given its impact, the directive will ensure fairer distribution of men and women on the single European labour market. We have to be consistent in our words and deeds. Wish you all success, Madam Jourova.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Prego.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dear colleagues, we women, we want to have an equal position with men, but not simply because we are women. We have all the diplomas that are needed, and therefore we need to have a social system behind us that will put us in a position that will help us and allow us to carry out fully our work, so that because of her career she shouldn't renounce from having a family. That's only we can achieve a quota of 40%, and I think there should be a less punitive and more attractive approach to this issue, particularly in SMEs and family companies. Thank you very much.
Grazie tanto, onorevole. Poproszę teraz o
This debate will now be summed up on behalf of the European Commission by Madam Commissioner Vera Jourova. The floor is yours, Madam.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I know we have shortage of time, so just a few words. Thank you for the discussion and for all the arguments I received here today. As Madam Arena said, we should also deal with the arguments which are heard from the side of the Council, of course. I think you know, I have a very wide agenda in my portfolio, and in the agenda of equality between men and women, the cultural differences and cultural background is very strong, so it might be part of it. But also, I must tell you that I had many discussions about it with many ministers and representatives of the member states, and nobody said that the goal is wrong. Everybody admitted that this is the proper thing to seek for, but many of the people I spoke to are allergic about the quota, so they are criticizing the instrument we are going to use. So we need to explain more that the quota is the necessary instrument, and the legislation itself, including sanctions, is the necessary instrument, because all the other ways have been already tested and they simply did not work. So these are the arguments, and we have some time ahead of us over the Latvian presidency to explain more the goal and the utilization of this instrument, and also perhaps to put more emphasis on the diversity issue, because it simply proved to be useful to have diversity on the boardrooms and to have more women there, because they simply were useful also during the crisis, because they felt the crisis is coming and they brought good solutions. But I don't want to repeat the arguments which we have already heard. So thank you for the discussion. Thank you also for the offer. I heard here, for instance, from Madame Niebler, that you will help us in negotiating in your countries where there are opposite positions. And thank you for encouragement. and have a nice rest of today.
Dziękuję bardzo pani komisarz. W imieniu Rady.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. And now on behalf of the Council, Minister Zanda Kalnina Lukaszewicz will take the floor.
Honourable members, the Latvian presidency is grateful for these exchanges with the European Parliament. We also know that the new Commission remains fully committed to its proposal for a directive for improving the gender balance on company boards. The Latvian presidency fully shares the view that it is a matter of political importance to have more women in decision-making positions. Gender balance in the company boardroom sends a positive signal all the way down to the company floor. It also creates more role models that benefit society as a whole. This is a modern and fair way. An equal society should be equal at all levels, honestly. The Latvian presidency will certainly play its part in seeking to advance the discussion in the Council on this important file. And we look forward to working together with the Parliament in a constructive spirit in the interest of the European companies, in pursuit of fairness in the society and for the benefit of European women and men. Thank you very much for this great discussion.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. We are not parting for very long. Let me now close this debate and move on to the next point of our debate. This is the statements of the Council of the Commission on the European measures for counteracting organised crime and corruption. The first speaker on behalf of the Council is Minister Zanda Kalnina Lukaszewicz. The floor is yours, Madam.
President, dear members, thank you for this opportunity to address the issue of organised crime and corruption. It is our obligation to guarantee to our citizens a genuine area of justice, freedom and security by preventing and combating serious and organised crime as well as corruption. We have to mobilise all our instruments to this end and combine efforts to adopt a comprehensive and coherent approach to crime. Europol's Serious and Organised Crime Threat Assessment estimated in 2013 that 3,600 organised crime groups were active in the European Union. Criminal organisations are increasingly flexible and are diversifying their activities. Links are steadily growing with a broad range of other lucrative criminal activities, such as drugs or weapon trafficking, trafficking in human beings, or exploiting technological developments for criminal purposes. Huge criminal proceeds are generated, which are infiltrated into the illicit economy. As a result, criminal groups are increasingly capable of influencing the operation of the legal markets and even the institutional and political processes across the EU by engaging in corruptive practices. The Council has been continuously engaged in a range of initiatives targeting organised crime and corruption, and has been treating them as a matter of highest political priority. Honourable members, a key measure is the EU policy cycle, which was adopted in 2010. This cycle ensures an operational response to organised and serious international crime through an optimised coordination and cooperation between national law enforcement authorities, EU institutions, agencies and other relevant partners. Within this framework, the Council agreed to a series of operational actions targeting, among other things, counterfeiting and cybercrime, which were